Hello, everyone. Today we have Jalysa Leva here with us. She is the creator of Jelly Ben and Pogo, an amazing PBS show that is starring a Filipino American family. So, Jalysa, if you wanted to talk a little bit more about yourself and about JBP, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm Jalysa Leva and or Leva, either one works. I'm the creator of Jelly and Pogo. The elevator pitch is it's basically a animated short series on PBS Kids. It features two Filipino siblings, their sea monster neighbor, and the fun adventures they go on as they solve like everyday kid problems using creative design thinking and empathy. It also talks a lot about Filipino American culture and it was a blast to make. As far as more about me, I'm originally a SCAD Atlanta grad, and after I graduated, I've stayed in Atlanta ever since. So that's where I am right now. And I've spent kind of the last few years developing my animation career and also launching my own kind of small businesses on the side, including TOTO-O Sari Sari Store, which is popping up for the first time on Saturday this next weekend, which also makes more like Fil-Am art that's really cute. Um, so yeah, that's basically me.
Amazing. So, yeah, today we're going to be presenting one of the episodes from Jelly Ben and Pogo called Visiting Lolo. And we're going to play that full episode. And then while we're doing that, if everyone could leave any questions that they have in the chat, and we're going to eventually give the floor to Jaleesa to allow her to answer all those questions. So, yeah.
Very wholesome.
That that is such a cute episode. I love it so much. It reminds me of my Lolo back in the Philippines as well. And I just love it. I love all the corporate like incorporation of Filipino culture. If you wanted to talk more about that episode, please do.
Yeah, that honestly, I'm really just thankful that PBS Kids was so supportive of us even having this episode. Um, I talked with my writers about wanting to do, a holiday, and Christmas felt really big. That's a really big Filipino holiday. We weren't ready for it, and to squish that into 3 minutes. Um, but All Souls Day was definitely a very like prominent and cultural one that I really wanted to talk about, and it does handle death and really like serious topics for kids. So PBS Kids was really game for it, and I'm really proud of how we handled it. It had a little bit of back and forth. It was the only episode that they kind of had like some notes for us. Um, but yeah, overall it came out really sweet, and I think we addressed the culture and we addressed death in a very like kid appropriate way. So that's I wanted to show that one and share it because it's the episode I have like the most pride for.
Yeah, definitely. I think that you guys handled that conversation really well. I know that's really hard to talk about with kids. So thank you so much for making that episode. I think you guys handled that perfectly.
Thanks.
Um, to jump into some of the questions, Ryan Mabanta asks, how can someone who hasn't been well connected with their cultural identity tell a good story? As an aspiring story artist who wants to make my own content, I've noticed that I seem to be lacking some of my connection to my identity growing up.
That's a really good question. And to be honest, like when I talk to other Filipino Americans, we all kind of share to some degree this level of like imposter syndrome where we don't feel like we're Filipino enough to talk about these types of stories. And I mean, I don't speak Tagalog fluently and I can only understand it. I've never been to the Philippines. So there are definitely parts of me that felt like I shouldn't be the one telling this, and we should have somebody else who's like way more Filipino doing this. But there just isn't enough out there, and by being disconnected to the level that you feel like, that is part of your story, and that's definitely part of what I put into Jelly and Pogo too. Like they are Filipino American, they're not just Filipino, so the complexity that comes with being in the diaspora in and of itself is a valid story and is something that other people will connect to. So don't be worried about not being connected to your heritage enough. Like definitely find out what your story is and start from there. And if you want to pull from more and do things like that and add more Filipino or add more whatever heritage you might have, you can. And there are communities and other people that you can bring onto your team to support you in doing that.
That's such an amazing answer and really validating. Also, being Filipino American, and a lot of people, especially in Asians in animation and people watching Jelly Ben and Pogo, can relate to growing up in the diaspora and kind of like feeling that disconnect. I'm the same as you. I can't fluently speak Tagalog either, so
Yeah.
that's really yeah. It's hard, and you feel like that disconnect. And I think specifically highlighting that part of their identity and growing up in the diaspora is really validating. And I just love Jelly Ben and Pogo. So yeah, Neve asks, what type of creature is Pogo? Do they happen to be a bakunawa?
No, they're just kind of a nondescript sea monster. And even with that, I don't know if Pogo really identifies hardcore as sea monster. And we don't really go that much into the lore in the show. There's a lot of lore that was written behind the scenes of like where she's from, where she immigrated from, because she's originally from Canada. So she also moved to this town. But we didn't really give her a specific like mythical creature to attach to her. She's just kind of a sea monster.
Well, she's cute either way. I love
We
Pogo.
love her.
Yeah, we love her. And Joy Selm, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, asks, how did the show come to be and what was the pitching process like?
Yeah, so Jellybun and Pogo actually started as an answer to an RFP, which is a request for proposal from PBS Kids. So they were asking studios and people to pitch original IP that would be used as an interactive show. And we pitched Jellybun and Pogo originally for that. So it was supposed to be like a video game story. So it wasn't pitched in the same way that most shows are pitched, where you have it already as a show and you like bring it to a network or studio. Um, but we lost that pitch to a really great IP. Scribbles and Ink actually won that, and that stuff is awesome. You can play it, but we got noticed by the head of content at PBS Kids at the time, which was Linda Semensky, and she asked us to further develop it into a show. So I don't know if there is like one way to pitch a show. I really don't think there is, because there are so many paths to getting greenlit, and I honestly think that a majority of it is right place, right time. You know, there are so many great pitches that don't make it simply because it just wasn't the right year for it. Um, and even with our own show, like we had other ideas for it, and they would tell us like, no, we already have a show that's like that. How can you make this different? So it was very organic into developing what it was, and it started way back in 2018. So there was a lot of time of us just trying to figure out what is our niche on PBS Kids, and how do we make sure that we create a place for ourselves that feels unique.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm so glad that they picked y'all up on that pitch. I'm so glad Jelly Ben and Pogo was made, and I'm really happy for all the kids that get to have this representation growing up, because I know that it's something that a lot of Fil-Ams crave, growing up, especially in the US. So that's just amazing. I'm so glad that it was picked up. Luis Nilles asks, did you feel a sense of did you feel a sense of social pressure or experience a feeling like you have to be a poster child for Filipino culture? I often feel like making content about my culture there is a pressure to represent all Filipino experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And to this day, I mean, everything I'm making that ties into the culture and is going to be criticized positively or negatively by the Filipino community, both in and out of the diaspora. So especially in creating the show, there was a lot of pressure to do it right because we were pioneering. And when you do that, you're kind of responsible in some way for the artists that are going to follow you. Um, so I think that the biggest thing that helped with that and relieving some of that pressure was surrounding myself with other Filipino voices. So it's not really just my single experience that I'm putting on screen. It's a collection of our voice actors and our writer and other people, my parents and my writer's parents. And we talked to so many people and asked what their experiences were, because it is diverse. Even within the diaspora itself, it's very diverse what people's experiences are like. So I think to some degree, I did have a bit of comfort in knowing that because I put so much of my authentic self into it, it couldn't be wrong. Like on some level, like Lola's accent has gotten some mixed feelings from people, and some people really love it. Some people feel like it's wrong to give her one, but it can't be because that's my Lola. So that's what she sounds like, and it that's it. And I think that's the key to like I think I saw a question in there as well in the chat about the difference between appropriation and representation. That representation is putting the authentic experiences on screen, and appropriation is someone just seeing it from the outside and going, oh, I see an accent, let me just put that in there, and not understanding like the stigmas behind it, not understanding like the strength that comes behind being bilingual, and how that influences how other people see you. Like it's that understanding of growing with it and living it that creates real representation, and people sense that.
I love that answer. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Yeah, I can relate, like kind of pioneering Filipino like representation, like you in your position. There's like a lot of pressure that comes to that, and especially what you said with Lola's accent and people criticizing it. I think maybe a lot of Fil-Ams kind of treat it as a joke because like it's been treated like a joke in the past, but yeah, it is true and authentic to your experience and to your Lola. Like my Lola has an accent too. Like all of my um, grandparents who are still here today have an accent. So that's authentic to you. And I really appreciate that you include that, because erasing that and not honoring that accent, that's erasure. And I'm really glad that you're authentic to yourself and to your experiences. But yeah, that's amazing. Um, Ryan asks, if I wanted to have an animated show made a certain way, would I be able to stick to my vision, or would I have to be prepared to change it entirely according to what the studio suggests?
um I don't know if I can fully answer that because I've only ever made this with PBS Kids under these very specific circumstances. And I know that there have definitely been very different experiences from mine for other networks. Um, Personally, PBS Kids was very, very supportive and was very hands off in terms of what kind of stories we could tell. And like I said, Visiting Lola was the only one where they even gave us like any kind of notes, really. So for us, it was very easy, and we didn't have to change anything really. Like we didn't have to change designs. Um, they saw our characters and said, "Great." So probably the easiest client to work with ever. I don't know if the same would be for Netflix or anything like that. The money is different, and PBS Kids gets a lot of grants, so they tend to not have a lot of creative hold on a lot of their content anyway. Um, but yeah.
That's so good. I'm glad that y'all were given that creative freedom. I know for some creators, like they get a lot of pushback from studios, but I'm really glad that you were able to express your voice and the crew's voice as authentically as possible. So that's amazing. Timothy asks, what made you decide on children's content?
I was already working in it, so I was at Primal Screen, which is a studio here in Atlanta, and They do mostly commercial work, so it's mostly for like Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Nick Jr., PBS Kids. Like PBS Kids has been a long time client of theirs. And I had worked on most of the kid content there, and it was my favorite stuff to work on because the art styles tend to be really like bright and soft and squishy and chunky and cute, which I've always liked, and the content always felt like it really mattered. Um, I got to work on a really fun like, educational project that like lasted years, and it was it's a Plorian Youp. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's by Curriculum Associates, and that really made me like feel like children's curriculum and like children's educational content was the type of content I like creating because it has such high impact and it's handled with so much care. You know, there's a lot of work curriculum wise that goes behind all these shows just on PBS Kids alone. And there's kind of a saying in the industry that like for PBS Kids shows, it's not uncommon to be in development for like 5 years, which is not normally the case for a lot of other shows. But that's because they really care. And I just like creating something that is beyond the funny gags and beyond the cute art style that really hopefully helps kids in some way.
I definitely think that it does that. So I think you definitely achieved that goal.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion, I love it. So Matthew Mahal, I don't know if that's your real last name, but if Mahal's your last name, that's super cool.
That's cool.
Matthew Mahal, yeah, right. Matthew Mahal asks, what's the time frame from first pitching your idea to the final product? How long is the process? You kind of touched on this, but yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the show. Because ours is a short series, it wasn't in development for nearly as long. But we did pitch in 2018, and it was kind of in and out of development for a couple of years until we were greenlit in 2020, like mid to late 2020. And then we started full production in 2021 after kid testing. So there was like the pitch and then like lots and lots of development in terms of curriculum and finding out what the show could teach. That took the longest. And then we did a like black and white animatic with like the real voice actors and everything that went through kid testing. Um, did well in kid testing. So right after that, we went straight into production. And then production itself was about 8 months, I think.
Okay, that's good. That doesn't seem like too long.
It was,
But
it
yeah.
was fast and furious, that's for sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Luis Nilles asks, what media influenced or informed the style of the show, whether that be the writing style or the art style? Is there any show from your childhood that you see reflected in Jelly Ben and Pogo?
So we definitely took a lot visually from Bluey. Um, Not necessarily like content wise, because they're very like parenting focused. And then we also took a lot of influence from Paprika on Netflix. Not the movie, the show, Paprika Twins. And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend watching it. It is stunning. It's a beautiful show. It's great for kids. They're so funny that, you know, as an adult, I loved watching it because the narratives are just hilarious. There's like an entire episode about an ice cube that melts and it's comedy gold. So yeah, we definitely like a lot of the voids, like in Nicole's background, like that was because of Paprika. We loved how they handled things like that. So visually, those were definitely like the two shows we pulled from the time.
That's so cool. I'm definitely familiar with Bluey, and I definitely see the similarities. I love Bluey. It's such a cute show. And yeah, I at first I thought you meant Paprika the movie, and I was like, I don't see that, but
No, that's
yeah.
really intense.
But yeah, Paprika the show. I just searched it up. It looks so cute. Um, yeah, and Christian Banzel. Hi, Christian. he said, on a side note, Jalysas tattoo and personal aesthetic is so cool. Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I saw on your Instagram that you got tatak by Isla. Yeah.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah.
Here's the tattoo for anyone curious.
Amazing. I've seen her work on Instagram. She's fantastic. Yeah.
So worth it. It took 7 hours and
Oh my
hurt a
gosh.
lot because we did the
Yeah.
traditional
Easy
tattoo
to do.
method. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen videos of the process. I was like, that it looks so good at the end, but it looks so so painful.
Yeah, I love the
Yeah.
slow-mo video that my husband filmed, and I
Oh,
can't even watch because it makes him squeamish. But I will say I got this to commemorate like when Jelly Bean and Pogo aired, because it was like the first time in my life that I felt like Filipino enough. Took that long.
oh,
So I was like, you know what, I can get this tattoo. I feel like I've done a lot of work to reconnect and finally feel like valid. So it
oh my
means a lot.
gosh. That's amazing. That's gonna make me cry. Um, eh, um, so Fatime, sorry if I mispronounced that. Bashir asks, are you worried about not getting opportunities in the future because of working on a cultural focused project? Is is that a weird question? She's currently working with social justice, social justice groups, and not sure if it's something that she could put on her resume due to bias.
I have a personal opinion on this. This may not be shared by most people, but personally for me, like in terms of my own comfort level, like if someone sees that I worked on this and they don't want to work with me because I worked on a cultural show, then I don't think I would want to work with that person. Like this was so much of me and there was so much love put into this. And I think if anything, that's a good benchmark for the type of people I know I want to work with in the future. If they see this and applaud it and understand it for what it is, then absolutely let's collaborate. But if they see it and go, I mean, do we have to talk about Filipinos? Then no, then you don't want to talk about a big part of me. So I think it depends on you. And if you end up wanting to make more work that's going to tie into, the social justice work that you do, then absolutely talk about it and you'll end up in the spaces that you want to be in versus trying to be palatable and dulling like your sense of self in order to work on something that may not even be your favorite because you had to censor yourself in order to do it. But I understand that it takes some privilege to be that choosy about the work that you pick up in the future. So it it really is up to you to weigh those options and what really is going to make your work fulfilling.
Definitely. And if somebody's hating on you for talking about your culture, boo. Why would
Right?
want to work with them? Like that's terrible. So
Yikes on
yeah, I
them.
agree. Yeah. Perry, oh, hi Perry. Perry Roberto Esperanza asks, what are key elements to have in a pitch?
I can only speak on pitching to PBS Kids. Um, Again, very different depending on who you're pitching to, which I guess would be the first thing is understand the network you're pitching to and understand what it is they look for in the content that they showcase. In terms of PBS Kids, curriculum is king, and they have, greenlit projects that had no art to begin with. Like it started with a Word document with just ideas, but the idea was there. So if you plan on doing something for someone like PBS Kids, it's the biggest thing that they were waiting for us to figure out to get us actually greenlit was like our curricular hook. Like, what is it that your viewers are going to take away from this show? And how is it different from anything we've aired so far? So it's kind of the reason why we leaned more into the Filipino culture. And it's what eventually led us to creative design thinking, which isn't super, super unique, but in the context of how we show it, it found its own space on their network, because they want diversity in the things that they're showcasing. So every show can't be about math. So it's finding where that hole is and finding a way to like fill that with whatever content you're creating.
Yeah, that sounds great. Shout out to PBS for allowing you to explore that. Yeah, so another question, what is your wish for audiences watching Jelly Ben and Pogo? What do you want them to take away from the series? And yeah.
Basically everything they've already been taking away from it. The biggest thing for the kids watching was I wanted them to get a sense of validation that they don't know that they need yet, but they'll realize as they get older that that was important. I just want their lives and their stories to be on TV, and I want them to feel seen. Because for a lot of the adults watching, a lot of comments I get are like, this is healing for my inner child. Like, I wish I had this growing up. Like, this would have helped me so much. And even me personally, like, this is a show I needed. And at some point making this, like, I was really making it for her, like for Jalysa that was like 5. So I hope that they get what I didn't at that age, and they go on to have more confidence to create their own content and not be afraid to do so when they get older, because they've seen themselves already and realize that their stories are worth telling.
That is so beautiful. I love that. I'm one of those adults being like, this is this is healing my inner child. Just like,
Right.
wow. Yeah, JVP is such a validating and such an amazing series. It's just it's so good. Everyone please watch it after this. Yeah. Christian Banzel asks, what self-indulgent elements, stories, or props have you and your team put into your beautiful baby JB&P?
I in terms of the crew, so Devin, who is here in the chat somewhere, I think Devin Adams was one of our illustrators for backgrounds and stuff, and she put props like in this background too, like that were like cultural that I never asked for. And there were moments even in the show that the animators put cultural things in, like there's a moment where they do Manipul, when um, Pogo's mom comes over in Kamayan, and I didn't ask for that. That was another animator that just threw that in there. So, which was really sweet, because I think like it speaks a lot to how much our crew cared about this, that they did their own research and they took initiative to be like, how can I infuse the Filipino culture in here, even though I'm not Filipino, which could not have asked for a better crew to do something like that. That was completely like on them, and they did that, and I love that they did that. But some of the self-indulgent things I think are like the character designs. Like I just put my family in there. My dad, every time he shows people in our family episodes with a dad character, he's like, does this guy look familiar to you guys? Who do you think he looks like? And it's like a spitting image of him, and they're like, wow, it looks just like you. And he goes, oh, me? So yeah, there's definitely like Lola is my Lola. Like even her attitude and how spunky she is, like that's my Lola. Um, so yeah, just unabashedly just put my whole family in there, including myself.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I can definitely just see like any Filipino people be like, does it remind you of anyone? Be like,
Right.
like
I saw the show
that's
and like
hilarious.
I don't know,
Yeah,
one of these characters looks really
it's
cool.
like,
I don't know what you
yeah,
think.
like kind of like me. That's kind of crazy.
Right.
So funny. Um, so you talked about working with other Filipino voices and then also having some people on your crew not be Filipino. Like, how is it working both with Filipinos and non-Filipinos on authentically incorporating that culture into the show?
Yeah, so actually our writing team, Steve Mank was one of our writers, and then Joy Regulano was the other. and then I helped write a couple of like pilot episodes, but then I kind of stepped out of the script writing after that. Um, so that was kind of like a nice example of like we have Filipino voices and then we have just American voices, and how do we make sure we're not like breaking anything culturally, or we're still staying funny. And it was actually really helpful. Like I wouldn't want to make this with a full Filipino crew, because I understand that this goes up on American television, and how Americans receive it, like Americans that are not Filipino, is important. And I want to know if we're reaching that audience too. So it was nice having, like Steve in the room, who could also talk about his own experiences, like being a man. And he wrote a lot of like the dad focused episodes, and Joy wrote a lot of like the more Filipino focused episodes. So it was nice getting like these different perspectives and seeing what was like cultural and what wasn't, when we're in the writer's room and Joy and I going, oh yeah, that thing that our families do, and Steve being like, what is that? And that was kind of our way of going, oh, that's a cultural element that we probably didn't realize because it was just normal for us. So it's like a nice gauge on what feels different and what feels similar. But in terms of art, we didn't have any other Filipino artists, unfortunately. So it was just me being like, that looks right. Looks like a jeepney. Great. So I hope that we can change that in the future. And if we make more Jelly and Pogo, that we can find more Filipino artists. And I feel like now that we're out there, it'll be much easier to find other Filipino animators who would want to join our team. So
Yeah, that sounds super cool. So is there gonna be a second season of Jelly and Pogo?
I don't know. I wish I could say yes.
Oh my gosh, I hope so.
But we're at the mercy of PBS Kids. They're the network, and I hope that they want to make more with us. They seem to really enjoy working with us, and they enjoyed the final product. So I don't think this is the end of Jelly and Pogo. It doesn't feel like it. I just don't know when the next season, if there is one, will be.
Okay, hoping that it's soon. I really
Me
hope
too.
so. Yeah. Yeah, like Louis says, manifesting. So,
Yes.
yeah, are there any other Filipino or Fil-Am stories that you'd like to tell in the future?
Definitely. I think there were a lot of things that didn't make it into season one. We had a list of other stories and like weird scenarios. There's even like Pogo focused stories. Um, we barely gave mom any time at all on screen. So we want to do like some mom focused stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of stories that we still want to tell, and I want to do more with music. And I'm sad that we didn't get enough karaoke in there to make me happy, but if there's season two, there will be like a karaoke focused episode. I need it. We'll make it work somehow. The last episode of the season with Ben, where he's singing, was like the closest we got to it, but wasn't quite enough. So there's definitely other things I want to throw in there.
Oh my gosh, we need a karaoke
I
episode.
know.
That is like such an integral part of Filipino culture. Just like all the titos and titas being like, "Come on, sing. I'll give you money."
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pressure of having to perform at
Oh
such a
my
young
gosh,
age.
so true. And I'm still bad at singing, but that pressure is always there. Um, that's hilarious. I hope that there's a season two and that you can explore that because we need that. Um, let's see here. Um, are there any memorable stories you have from working on the show? Like any like behind the scenes stuff that's just like really fun?
Yeah, I have so many good memories. And again, the people in the chat from the crew, I hope you also have good memories. But I was just talking about this. So Devin mentioned Swola, which was one of the basically like memes that cropped up in during production, and Swola, I don't know where she started. If you guys remember, please tell me. But it's basically like a swole version of Lola, and we used to like play games and stuff because the team was entirely virtual. So we played like Gartic Phone, and there was this entire series of Gartic Phone drawings that were just Swola, just all these buff Lolas. um, and I have every single one like saved on my computer. So I just I have a whole folder of memes and like fan art from the crew and just like random jokes, inside jokes that like I truly treasure. And when somebody asks me like what were you most proud of with the show, and like it's those like weird little drawings from the crew, because that was a really good signifier that we were doing something right and creating hopefully a really like healthy, happy environment for our artists. And that was a huge priority for me going into production, because for anybody in the industry, it's notorious for burnout and like pushing people over the edge, and it's a really difficult industry to stay healthy in. So having been an animator myself, I think that helped to recognize that we should try to do things differently as best as we can, and prioritize the health of everyone on the project. Because at the end of the day, if people worked on this and they left worse off than when they joined, then it wasn't worth it. So I hope that like everybody left with good memories and with something better than when they came in.
Yeah, that's definitely amazing that you're talking about burnout in the industry. I know that as a lot of people in, or for a lot of people in Asians in animation and wanting to break into the industry, they really appreciate people like you who are looking out for them and looking out for if they suffer from burnout. So it's really great that you're conscious of that. And everybody running a show should be conscious of that. But yeah, thank you for looking out for everyone who you're working with. And then also the Sola jokes, that's funny. That is so, that is like I can just imagine like a motivational poster with like Swole Lola. And she's just like I would buy that. I would buy that in a heartbeat. That'd just be so funny. And another question that we have is, what advice would you give fellow and aspiring writers when going about the writing and pitching process?
I don't know if I can give the best advice because I'm technically not a writer. I could talk about what I liked and what helped when working with our writers. So Joy Regulano was much more seasoned in show writing than any of the Primal crew, and working with her was really eye-opening because Steve and I were both complete rookies in terms of like linear content to this degree for original IP. Um, and one of the really great things about her was she was just so efficient at like creating stories and knowing where to cut back and how to practice really good discipline in terms of figuring out the vision of the show and how to fit her writing into that vision versus just going off the rails with whatever she found really fun. Um, we definitely encouraged her to put a lot of herself into it, but just like the amount of precision and control that she had over what she wrote, like every one of her scripts like came in under the 3 minute mark or like right at 3 minutes. Like we never had to shave it down. If anything, we just like plussed it after the fact. So very punctual, awesome writer. I think that comes from practice and writing for clients, because I think everyone can, like write things for themselves and kind of bend the rules when they need to make the story that they want. But, when you join a crew, you're really executing another person's vision. So it's important to understand drawing that line between like what you personally want to put into it and what is going to make the story better for the show. And finding a way to do both and balance both.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I've heard like in the industry, like you kind of have to sacrifice a lot of things that you want to put in order to make your project the best that it can possibly be. So thank you so much for sharing that experience. And that's super cool that you were able to learn from her and being and also just kind of like have an eye-opening experience. That's amazing. Christian asks, kind of like uh, connecting with that. Christian asks, what was challenging to you and your crew when developing and producing JPMP?
Everything. Like, um, I am very new to all of this still, and when they say everybody in the industry is just flying by the seat of their pants, they're not lying. Like everybody is just, we look like we know what we're doing, nobody knows what they're doing. So um I think what was challenging was just finding my footing to begin with, and having the confidence to assert the ideas that I wanted to assert, knowing that it would be the right decision. Because at the end of the day, everyone looks to you and says, "Okay, is this what we're doing?" And you just have to say yes or no and go with it. And um, to me, that's been the hardest. And I don't know if that's also because like I'm a woman and I'm not used to people respecting like me in a sort of like leadership role. I've had to fight so much for my voice to be heard that when people were actually just listening, it was really, really odd and a new experience. Um, and also being like POC, like you just don't think that your voice matters. So for a long time, it was a lot of like being really unsure, like, should we go with this, and doubting a lot of my own decisions. Um, but I think eventually, once you get used to it and you realize that like your decisions are what help other people, like staying steadfast is what creates a solid vision, that you learn to to be a little more secure in your decisions. But I did not come super far. I'm still quite insecure about a lot of decisions that I make. My husband can attest to that. Every choice I had to make, I'd like come up to him after work and be like, I don't know, should I do this or should I do this? And should I do that? Um, but I think that was the biggest challenge, was like the self-confidence to lead and feel like I was doing the right thing. But um, I will also add that uh, it also played in my favor in a bit, not being seasoned, because I didn't come into this going, I know exactly how we should do everything. I was super, super willing to listen to other people and be like, how should we do this? Like, what would be best for our team? And especially because we did all of production in quarantine, there was nobody who really knew how to do that. And so a lot of it had to be innovative in terms of Primal Screen. So it was a lot of like listening to the crew and being like, okay, well, let's implement this thing. Like, let's do work alongs every week so that we can feel like a team. Let's do team weeklies where we hype each other up and we just like look at everybody's art and we can actually see everything in the pipeline moving forward. Let's do monthly one-on-ones with everyone on the crew, none of which existed at the studio prior to this production. So we implemented a lot of like new ideas, and I think being fresh to this helped with being willing to implement a lot of new ideas that ended up working, which is good.
I love that for you and your crew. Yeah, like kind of having that solidarity of learning the ropes together and kind of learning like this entire like pipeline, especially from um, work from home. So that's amazing. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable about your position and your experiences being, especially a woman of color, uh, in an industry that is dominated by white men. So thank you so much for being like very raw and honest about that. It's definitely hard, like not just in the industry, but like in everyday life, to feel like we have a voice and to be able to speak up and talk over people the way that we've been talked over like our entire lives. So thank you so much for being so vulnerable with that experience. So in addition to that, what would your advice be to people who are trying to find their voice in the industry and trying to find that confidence, especially being a part of a marginalized group where most of the time you're kind of just taught or told, or like you kind of get the vibes that you're just supposed to sit there and be quiet?
My advice is always build community. So for a long time at Primal, I was kind of the only one doing my thing, and it wasn't until I really built like a good support system with like other coworkers and even like other Asian women that I worked with, that I realized like, oh, we have a lot of like struggles in common, and we have a lot of things that we support each other on that other people don't understand. Um, we worked on a project. It was one of the first things I directed fully on my own, and it was a Sesame gig. But we got notes and feedback that felt wrong to me, but I didn't understand why. And other people on my team it was mostly white people, and it wasn't until I brought it to like another Asian woman at the studio, and I'm like, am I crazy for this? And she was like, no, that's nuts. Like, I totally understand why you would be upset with this note. um that kind of like validation and support really only comes from people who can understand your experience, and other people can be empathetic, sure, but that kind of like rallying that you can do for each other is what really built up my confidence. It was having other people who are different in their ways that can understand what it's like to be marginalized and understand what that fight for a voice feels like. Like, they're going to be the ones who are going to support you when you feel like you're crazy, when you feel like you're gaslit, and you feel like you're not being listened to, and it is very real, you aren't being listened to. So absolutely build community, and not just for your work, but just in general, and get in touch with your community outside of art to just support, because it's arm in arm that like we can move forward, and nothing really great is done alone. So build up your community.
That is amazing advice. Like I love that, like the whole concept of building a community, and that's just such a like a vulnerable experience, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. And yeah, because a lot of the time I feel like people in marginalized communities, we don't get that same respect, and or like that same amount of credit to our suggestions and our ideas. So I think really finding care and is it solidarity in our communities, that is so important. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
and
sharing that.
if I can add too, I will say that it's not a responsibility we ask for, but like once you do have that confidence, it is kind of your responsibility to like pull out the seats for other people. And something that I find really important when working on these projects and working with Jellybean and Pogo moving forward is like, for all my directors that were women and all my artists that were women, was making sure like they were saying something. What were you saying? Like, making sure that the seat is there for them, for if they're not ready to like speak up as loudly yet. Like, it's your job, if you're in that position of power, to do that and pave the way.
Yes, I agree. That's amazing advice. Yeah, like advocating for each other, not just having like private and separate solidarity, but also making sure that in those situations, each other, like everyone is being heard. I love that. That's amazing. And I think that's a really beautiful note to end our event on. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this was such an eye-opening experience, and this like was a very validating talk, and I think it'll help a lot of people, especially um, other people of color, other women, other people trying to break into this industry and have their cultural authentic voice be heard, and create that media that we all wanted, to heal our inner child and to provide for upcoming generations. So thank you so much for everything that you do. Yeah, and if we could also have everybody turn on their videos, I'd love to get like a little group photo of everybody who attended. That'd
Anyone in
be
PJs, you're
great.
about to be exposed.
Yeah, everyone in pieces.
I wish you guys had all turned your cameras on earlier. So I love seeing all the Asian folks in here. That's great.
Yes, I love seeing everybody's faces. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's like really is it nerve-wracking to just like look at a bunch of names and start speaking. So
Yeah, talking to the void.
yeah, yeah. I love seeing all of your beautiful faces. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, Jalisa, for joining us and for giving us so much insight and so much vulnerability into your experience being a showrunner and pitching your own show and incorporating your culture and being as authentic as possible. I think this was a really amazing event that a lot of people needed, myself included. And I think you're just doing amazing work. And I hope, like, I really, really hope that Jelly Ben and Pogo gets another season and that you're just able to create more amazing things. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you for your questions.